Hey, welcome back to Garbeardia. We have for you the next chapter of Section 222, which is Chapter 4. But before we get to the whole shindig and all the voice acting, we got a few things we have to do beforehand. So the first thing we're going to touch on is, of course, Redcon 1, our main affiliate. And it's not just about protein powder and protein drinks. There's other things on the website to help you out. I, for one, been really using a lot of the fade out powder, the breach powder, and the canteen powder. What these do are, the fade out powder just helps you sleep. It helps you go to fuck to sleep, which is hard for some folks like me to do when your brain is just so loud. The other ones are breach to help you kind of recover from exertion at the gym. Exertion at the gym. And then of course canteen powder to keep you hydrated. That, and it helps kind of flavor your water so you feel more likely to drink all the water you need with a little sprinkle of canteen powder in it. It's actually quite nice, and it does give you electrolytes and that kind of stuff and some vitamins, so it's just really kind of good for you. Besides Redcon 1, there is the second book now out on Amazon for purchase, link down below so you can grab that. And there's also the coffee, so we're still not monetized, so if you want to drop us $1, it would help out a lot. Probably you giving us $1 is more than YouTube would fucking give us. So if you really like the story, you want to support it, stop by the coffee, buy a patch, donate $1, whatever you want to do. It's there as an option. Anywho, let's get on to the next chapter of the Veil Riders, Chapter 4. Chapter 4, A Castle Too Crowded, Section 222. Limmick ducked his head as his hands fumbled with a pair of M67 grenades, rifle rounds snapping over and off the thick wooden table he and Wolf were hiding behind. He looked over to Wolf, who ducked back down after rapidly firing his revolver.
Wrong fucking staircase.
Wolf barked out with a laugh as he flicked open the gate of his peacemaker and smashed the plunger, empty brass casings tinkling off the ground next to him one by one as he rotated the cylinder. Unfortunately for them, they found themselves coming out into a large room from their chosen path, and only realizing too late they had run upon the main chosen child barracks within the keep. Even more unfortunate was that an entire platoon had come back from tangling with their enemy outside, fully loaded for an argument or two. Vitka awkwardly held a stolen rifle, taken from the man whose head she had cleaved off his shoulders, and let loose a torrent of suppressive fire as she popped over the top of another table she shared with Eldehinda. The dwarfess was already out of ammunition for her rifle, and continued to plug away at any exposed targets with a dwarven-manufactured P226. Across on the other side of the room, the enemy platoon had turned over their own bench tables, lockers, and beds for makeshift cover, all the while attempting to push up and obtain fire superiority. Wolf looked around, knowing the situation was untenable, and spotted another archway that led to another hallway.
Eldehinda!
Wolf shouted, and when the dwarfess looked over, he pointed to the archway over on their right, only a mere 50 feet away.
Are you out of your mind?
Eldehinda roared, and both she and Vitka ducked as an enemy M249 peppered their cover, blowing chunks of wood away from the edges of their table. Vitka shook the wooden splinters free of her hair.
Oh, come on, Eldehinda. Doorway is only a quick run.
Not when there are machine guns, poor brain. We should just go backwards to the stairs we came out of.
Eldehinda howled back. She saw a small metal ball land next to her table and wobble along the wooden floor towards her. She quickly picked up the grenade and threw it back over the table, turning a nearby sofa into a memory. Wolf shrugged down as he popped new ammunition into his peacemaker, his cattleman's hat bending awkwardly. He looked over to Limmick and shouted over the clamor of battle.
Limmick, can you throw those things just beyond that archway?
Limmick looked around the corner of the table quickly and ducked back around, sweat pouring down his face and neck.
Yeah, I think so.
Wolf closed the gate on his revolver and pulled the hammer back. When he saw Limmick still crouched down next to him holding the grenades, he spluttered.
Well, what in the fuck are you waiting for? Throw the damn things!
Right.
Limmick said again, giving his head a shake and shuffling closer to the edge of the table. He held the grenade in each hand, ran the tips of his horns through the pins, then jerked down, pulling both of the safety pins out with a soft chick of metal. He stood as much as he dared to see his target, a small cluster of beds and a few chosen children poking their shoulders up to fire a burst from their rifles, and reared back with a hand. His first and second throw sent the grenades flying on target towards their destinations, and they looked good as far as he could tell. As he went to duck down behind cover, he was spotted by a chosen children's soldier, and he felt something hot punch through the top of his left deltoid and zip out the other side of his arm. Limerick fell down behind the table with a shout and clutched at his arm, eyes wide in disbelief.
I've been shot? Holy shit, they shot me.
Welcome to the club, sport.
Wolf said in a lackadaisical way as he fumbled in a pants pocket and pulled out a small healing potion, tossing it to Limerick. Limerick caught the potion, then noticed blood was all over his hand.
Sergeant Major, I'm bleeding.
Wolf ducked down and looked at Limerick with a squint.
Yes, that's generally how it works. Now drink the potion, you goober.
On the other side of the room, the two grenades exploded. Unlike the first grenade, there was no sofa to land in and catch the shrapnel, and the small metal shards ricocheted around the room with a buzz of whirling metal.
Ah! Are you kidding me?
Eldehinda howled out, reaching back and slapping a hand to her right butt cheek as a small shred of shrapnel cut through with a zinging buzz. Vitka turned, looked, and spluttered out a laugh.
Eldehinda butt hurt.
Is it bad?
Eldehinda shouted, attempting to look over her shoulder after seeing blood on her hand. Vitka leaned down, only flinching as a piece of stonework blown away by a rifle round bounced off her hair.
Nah, butt cheek will be fine. Cute scar to tell dwarf boys about.
Oh, you pig!
Eldehinda growled, sliding a new magazine into her P226 as blood began to slowly make its way down the cloth of her pant leg.
Sergeant Major!
Wolf looked around at Eldehinda, shrugging down against the table he shared with Limerick.
Yeah?
This fight is completely bent over a barrel!
She roared, reaching around the side of her cover to fire blindly as more pieces of the table were blown away.
Yeah, I kinda got the feeling. Let's go back down.
Wolf began, looking back towards the stairwell they came from as a 40mm grenade flew long over their cover and detonated inside the stone hallway. The stone shuddered and came away, not built to withstand a concussion of that caliber. Wolf swallowed, then looked back around at Eldehinda, who was staring at him with wide, worried eyes.
Never mind. You got any ideas?
Eldehinda shook her head shortly from side to side, pistol poised in her hand. Limerick rolled over to face Wolf, his arms gripping his rifle. He shrunk inward as a round pierced a thin part of the table and flew past his horns. The round catching one of the grenade pins hung there with a cheerful ringing of metal.
Sergeant Major, what are we going to do?
I don't know.
Wolf said with an air of a laugh. It felt weird having his back to the wall for once.
We either have to push forward, or simply wait here and die.
Waiting and dying doesn't sound like an attractive prospect.
Eldehinda growled out with a mumble as blood was now pooling into her boot. Vitka, seeing she no longer had any ammo, let out a war cry and threw the rifle towards the center of the room.
This sucks.
Agreed.
Limerick cried out as he fumbled around with his free hand for one of his few remaining grenades. Wolf swallowed hard, looked around at his little group, then righted his cattleman's hat into proper position.
All right, we're gonna try and rush them. Make way towards the doorway best you can. Everyone ready?
Everyone nodded, and Wolf turned around, breathing in and out of his mouth as he settled his nerves.
Okay.
He breathed out more to himself than anyone else, wincing as rounds snapped and buzzed past him.
1,
He yelled out, looking left and then right to make sure everyone was ready.
2.
He panted, cocking back the hammer on his peacemaker. He went to say 3, his tongue pushing against his teeth, but a faint red glow from their targeted staircase caught his eye. He blinked, watching as the glow began to grow brighter and brighter as it came up the staircase. He laughed out in shock as Erinda Caine came into view, her plate carrier and other pieces of armor glowing softly and shimmering with a red hue, as if made with blood-red obsidian. Erinda Caine broke out into a sprint, running right out of the stairwell entryway towards the cover of the Chosen Children platoon. Wolf then realized that the knuckles of her fist were covered in what looked like red crystals. Wolf didn't have time to even process her arrival before Eldehinda, Makarat, and Captain Fadithus also barreled out of the stairwell, moving laterally behind cover as they fired sporadically in order to suppress targets in front of them.
This is the wrong floor!
Makarat yelled out, but spun around in shock as she heard Wolf bellow from behind her.
Right floor, haha, right floor.
He yelled with a laugh and leapt over the table, moving up to take cover beside them. The rest of Wolf's group rushed over their own cover to join the new shooters, finding heart in the arrival of friendly aid.
What are you doing here?
Captain Fadithus yelled out as she sprayed wildly at a cluster of chosen children on their left, while on the right there was a litany of screaming from the victims of Erinda Caine. Vitka saw Erinda Caine in hand-to-hand combat and perked up immediately.
Same as Wolf, right floor.
Without further word, she vaulted over her cover and zipped across the scattered and destroyed furniture, diving into the melee that Erinda Caine had started. Now that more rifles were in the mix on the side of Wolf, they were emboldened and began to slowly gain fire superiority and pick off targets as they bore. It was still an annoying game of whack-a-mole, and Wolf wondered if soldiers enduring trench warfare found it as annoying as he did. On the right side of the large room, Erinda Caine was laying down a blistering wave of blows onto those she closed distance with, rifle rounds thudding into her infused armor and shattering away shards of the odd red coating. When these shards hit the ground, they quickly melted as if they were ice, and puddles of blood only remained in their wake. Whenever Erinda Caine caught someone with a hook or an uppercut, shards of the crystals on her knuckles would shatter and embed themselves into the flesh of her victims. Wolf noted between reloads that these shards seemed to cause pain, as the chosen children caught by her blows writhed and clawed at the wounds as if it burned like white phosphorus. With nowhere to run on the right side except into the intercepting fire from Wolf's now combined team, the chosen children attempted to close the distance and overwhelm Erinda Caine. This would have worked if it wasn't for Vitka.
Bodies! Bodies all over! What more could Vitka ask for?
Vitka cackled as she finished off her first kill, deftly punching her dagger-length talons through the Valley Elf's chest before launching off his body like a winged missile. The bayonet aimed towards Erinda Caine's exposed side plate whipped away as its wielder was tackled bodily by Vitka, her wing claws punching through both of the Southern Elf's eyes and her talons studding through their chest. The woman didn't even have time to scream before Vitka exploded her leg muscles downwards, ripping away the lower ribs and spilling the contents of the Southern Elf's body onto one of her screaming comrades, his face burning with a shard of Erinda Caine's knuckle crystals.
Try and hide from Vitka now.
Vitka cackled as she kicked away the ruined body of the Southern Elf, her eyes wide with the bloodlust of battle. The pair of squads in that position would have been able to handle Erinda Caine once they wore away her magically infused armor, but they could not handle a Himalaya added into the brawl. Erinda Caine bellowed out her own war cries as she wound a fist back and brought it crashing against the center of one Southern Elf's face, his nose breaking apart and shards of facial bone forced roughly up into his brain. Now that the script had been flipped, the last two squads of the Chosen Children platoon were becoming pinched between constant gunfire and the two melee fighters currently tearing apart their flank. Desperate situations called for desperate measures, as watching their only medic get their head and hands torn away by Vitka made them realize just how quickly the tables had turned. Wolf noticed them running around and shuffling with a crate as his group attempted to suppress them, and he quickly began to reload the 3 empty cylinders in his peacemaker.
What are they doing?
Limik called out, reaching over and taking a spare magazine from Makarat. Wolf looked over to Eldehinda and noticed she had her eyes shut. Not in a panicked way, but in a way someone would when trying to remember something. Her eyes popped open as quickly as Wolf noticed them, and she looked up to the human with worried eyebrows.
Wolf, what is a schmall?
Limik's eyes opened wide, and he jerked his head towards Eldehinda.
A small? That's an anti-tank weapon.
Wolf quickly slammed a gate shut on his peacemaker and stood up straight despite the gunfire cracking past.
Caine, Vitka, get down!
Both of them looked up to see one of the chosen children pulling some kind of tube up into the air, and they dived down, pulling the mangled bodies of their kills over them for cover. The living chosen children on that flank took the chance to sprint as fast as they could towards their fellows who were already making way towards their own exit. Wolf cocked back the hammer on his revolver and laid the sights in front of him, his other hand down at the side with open fingers. He saw the tube of the small come up from an open gap in the cover, but didn't see the shooter. His sights wavered left as he traced along the tube and where he thought it was behind the cover, judging where the shooter's shoulders would be. The battered and ragged remains of the platoon were now quickly becoming scarce as they retreated, and Wolf tilted his cattleman's hat down, the brim just above his front blade sight.
There.
He murmured and pulled the trigger, the hammer flying forward and striking the primer on the .45 caliber round. The round punched through the dresser drawers with a cascade of wooden splinters and shards of broken lead, showering the southern elf holding the small. She winced and shrugged down as the wood shards and splinters peppered into her exposed skin, and the fragmented bits of lead pinged off her skull like stones. As she tensed and closed her eyes from the debris, her finger pulled back on the trigger. The weapon fired, deafening everyone in the room as the payload detonated against the far edge of the ceiling with a concussion that was felt in the bones of all. The ceiling shuddered, rumbled, then slowly began to come away, raining cut stone and debris down onto the floor below. Sweat dripped down Errol's chin as she breathed in and out raggedly through her nose, the bang of hair hanging out the backstrap of her ball cap fraying with nerves. She could hear the slow escalation of gunfire from somewhere in the castle, as well as the previous explosions of bombs, and realized she was running low on time. Somehow Yule was holding out despite the amount of pain he was in, and she could see his thoughts swimming around in his rolling eyes. Yule was now covered in a road map of neat white lines all over his chest, stomach, thighs, and even on his groin. Errol had become desperate during the previous few minutes and thought that carving away at his genitals may break him quickly, but all it did was make him bellow out in pain and rage against his restraints. He had been screaming so loudly that her ears were ringing at this point, but hope tugged at her heart as Yule began to speak out in low, spittle-flecked tones. I can't do it. No more, he panted out, his chest heaving and body spasming in the throes of old pain. His voice was raspy and hoarse, as if he had been screaming for days. I can't do it. Unseen by Errol, Caine just sighed out in shared pain and pressed her forehead to Yule's temple, her arms wrapped under and around Yule's head in an attempt to cradle him.
I know it hurts, but you can do it. Look at your wrist bindings. You have to hold out just a little while longer.
Why do I have to? Yule howled, but turned his head to look at Caine and where she was looking. He saw with a pant of pain breath they'd been struggling so much and so forcefully that the leather straps around the buckles were beginning to crinkle and fray. Caine heard his outraged thoughts, and she closed her eyes, a single tear flowing down her cheek.
I know you want me to just break them, but I can't. I cannot affect the physical world yet. I am too weak. But killing her will bring me one step closer,
Caine said, and opened her eyes to glare with heat at Errol, who had stepped forward, her voice hopeful.
You don't have to heal. You can just tell me. Tell me where the veil is.
Errol whispered, both her knives poised in her hands.
All you have to do is tell me, and all the pain stops.
How would I know where the veil is, you daft bitch? Yule spat, pulling hard on the straps that held his wrist in place as he leaned as far forward as he could. Who even fucking told you I knew where it was? Errol now bared her teeth in a snarl as she stomped towards Yule.
She told us you knew! She told us you could be the only one moving it around.
Who? Yule growled back, again pulling at his bindings. Errol reared back a low-ready blade and plunged it into his thigh as her outrage finally broke over the dam of her patience, her voice a frustrated scream.
Where will you?
The pain of the blade didn't even register as the name of his daughter left the lips of Errol, and the world somehow snapped into focus. The suffering of his body dulled away, and his mind cleared as if he had stepped out from a fog cloud. What did you just say? Yule said in a hushed tone as his fists balled so tightly his skin and knuckles groaned. Errol leaned up so she could be nose to nose with Yule, stepping onto an overturned bucket.
I said your daughter, Harlow Yule, told us you would know what a veil was.
A vile smile cut across her lips, turning into an unsavory grin as she continued.
It only took me 2 minutes to make her sing.
Cringia, staring with slitted eyes at the woman who brought her downfall, kissed Yule on the cheek, placed her hands behind his elbows, and gave him a little nudge of strength as he lunged forward. The leather straps holding his arms in place snapped briskly, the buckles rattling across the wooden floors, and Errol's shocked screech echoed around the walls of the rumbling room.
Caine, Vitka, run for it!
Wolf screamed out as the Chosen Children platoon began to fully retreat, the partially blinded small gunner tripping and falling over the bodies of the dead before rolling back to her feet. Erinda, Caine, and Vitka both stumbled up, tossing away their meaty blast cover and staggering their way away from the falling ceiling. Limmick and Wolf reached over their own bullet hole-ridden furniture and dragged both Erinda, Caine, and Vitka bodily over their cover. More stone began to rain down, the top floor coming away in a rush of debris. When the rumbling stopped and the rain of stone began to slow, Wolf opened his eyes with a blink and coughed, debris dust filtering through the air. He leaned up with a groan to see that a quarter of the floor above them had come down in a flowing pile of building materials, and starlight was filtering in from the floor above. What caught his ear was a woman's voice, and he fanned the dust in front of him with his hat as he stepped over their cover and began to walk towards the large slush pile of castle stone and wood. Wolf coughed again and called out,
Hello? You okay over there?
He heard someone mumbling in English of all languages, and he began jogging forward towards the clearing dust cloud.
My knives. Where are my knives?
Errol mumbled, coughing raggedly.
Knives? Did a kitchen come down on us?
Wolf called back out in English, and he froze as the figure came into view, now clutching a small leather bundle to her chest and a single gleaming blade in her hand. He saw the woman, and he saw Yule laying sprawled out on the stone floor, blood running down the side of his face. Wolf noticed that the woman was bleeding as well, the gold-flecked crimson coming down in dust-coated streams past the rim of her black ball cap. The ball cap was tilted awkwardly, and Wolf saw a few of the now dingy white letters.
CIA since the...
Wolf began, but realization dawned on him faster than his eyes could read.
Faye!
Fuck you, Rustblood!
Errol screamed out as she used her foot to launch a pile of broken stone and dust at Wolf, then took off into a sprint towards the intact hallway the enemy platoon had used to escape. Wolf turned his head and ducked to avoid the broken stone, then stood back straight.
Fucking Faye!
Wolf roared in English and pulled his peacemaker up, firing at the retreating shadow of Errol as fast as he could. On his fourth round, he heard Errol screech out a curse, but his cylinder was dry. No more ammunition to spend, and she disappeared down the stairwell.
You!
Olivara cried out, scrambling over the broken stone and shattered furniture to run to him. Everyone else stood up, coughing and dusting the stone dust off their face or hair, while Olivara came down onto her knees beside Yule, cradling his head in her arms.
Oh, you. What did they do to you?
She whispered in a hushed voice as his body screamed out in pain to her, and not a single part of his flesh was spared of the little white lines that ran all over him. In lockstep with his pain was the miasma of madness that swam in his head like a monster, and she quickly dove into him with her tendrils, attacking and driving it away as quickly as she could. She could feel Cringia there as well, fuming and enthralled with rage, but did not make any move to stop Olivara.
That's Yule?
Limmick asked, coughing a little more and taking off his patrol cap to whack the dust off of it.
How do we contact Mullen then?
Wolf was already pulling a flare gun from his day pack and aiming at a little patch of sky above them.
We hope he sees the flare and meets us at the rendezvous point.
As the orange flare popped and hissed into the air, Eldehinda laughed.
I'm actually glad we didn't bring radios. Damn things probably would have broken or exploded by now.
Wolf waved his hand.
We could never risk them knowing too much anyway. Mullen using the harpies was already too large of a risk. Let's get Yule to his feet and keep moving. We have to make our way to the gate.
Flare,
Helena said, stopping by a window as they were making their way down a wide, abandoned hallway. Mullen walked up to the window and peered out, watching the orange flare arc merrily through the sky.
Orange means they found Yule and are making their way towards the gate we came in.
Mullen then pulled out his own flare gun, loaded in an orange shell, and shot an answering remark into the sky.
Regina is going to see 2 orange flares and begin planting explosives. We need to move.
I don't mean to be rude.
Adina said, walking around the two of them in order to peer out the window herself.
But we're on the upper floors. How are we getting down?
Mullen frowned.
I would have taken my team and just gone across a roof or two, but with you in tow, we're going to have to find another way.
Apply us directly to the path, more or less.
Momoy said, giving Adina a light prod in her flank with his grudge breaker.
Just try to keep up with us, and hopefully we run into old guard and none of the new weaponry.
Adina pinned her ears back and glared at Momoy.
Don't poke me. I'm an emissary, not one of your brutish friends.
Come on, let's go.
Mullen growled and took off at a jog down the hallway. Their progress went well, right up until they got lost within the many halls of the keep, and the lack of staircases was beginning to make Mullen's blood boil. After what felt like 5 minutes of jogging and seeing what seemed like the same doors over and over again, Mullen finally broke his calm.
Where the hell is the damn staircase? Did we get turned around?
Mullen shouted, his nerves fraying as time was no longer on his side.
I don't think so.
Helena said, jogging over to a nearby window and looking down.
We're above the stables and carriage house, which is on fire, and we've dropped a floor somehow.
Mullen took off his patrol cap and threw it against the ground.
God damn it. Why didn't I just turn around and take the other staircase back?
Mullen fumed for a moment as Helena, Momoy, and Adina stood there awkwardly, while outside the pop and crack of gunfire began to rise.
We need to get down as fast as possible. Keep up with me,
Mullen said, then took off at a run, his gear rattling. Everyone else took off after him, Momoy puffing angrily as he struggled to keep up with both Mullen, Adina, and Helena. Sweat poured down Helena's face as she kept pace with Mullen, and while the hallway seemed to go on corner after corner, they finally caught sight of a narrow side staircase along a wall. While everyone else had ease going down this tight passageway, Adina had more trouble keeping her hoofing on the steps, and had to press against the close walls with her hands in order to stay upright. More gunfire was crackling to life outside as they came into some kind of servants' quarters, the door of which was barred with 3 locks lashed onto a steel bar.
For fuck's sakes.
Mullen said, then shuffled out of the way and pressed himself against the wall of the narrow passageway.
Momoy, do the thing.
Roger, boss.
Momoy said, helping Adina back up a bit on the stairs to give him more room, then waited for Helena to get out of the way of the door. Helena had to think thin, but managed to give Momoy enough room to charge down the steps and get speed. Throwing his entire body against the door, Momoy thundered into the room with the clatter of shattered wood and the bent steel bar rattling away across the stone floor. Momoy lost his footing over the broken pieces of door and came down hard onto his shoulder, skidding to a painful stop.
Ugh, that hurt.
Momoy groaned as he slowly turned onto his stomach to push himself off the ground.
You broke your rifle.
Helena said as she ducked inside behind Mullen, both of them raising their rifles and clearing the dusky, dark room. Momoy groaned and turned his head, spying the shattered FAL beside him.
Not again.
Adina stepped into the room, ducking her head under the door frame and holding her stolen sword out in front of her.
Awfully dark in here. Don't you have any light?
1 moment.
Mullen said and reached down, fumbling in his pouches for his human-made flashlight. With a click, a beam of light sliced through the gloom and lit the room, and Helena lowered her rifle with a shunt of breath from her lungs.
You've gotta be fucking kidding me.
Mullen mumbled and casted his beam across the many faces hiding along the walls of the room or under cots. The room was filled with adult women, teenagers, and children, all of which wore the simple clothes of servants, gardeners, or manual laborers that tended the keep. Helena noted with distaste that every single one of them wore the debtor's bracelets, Even the 7-year-old boy who looked as if he worked in the kitchens, gauging by the burn marks on his arms.
No.
Mullen said, turning and looking at both Helena and Momoy.
There is no way we can take these people with us.
Sergeant Major.
Helena began, but Mullen cut across her.
They are engaged outside. We are out of time and we need to leave and rejoin the section. How in the hell are we going to keep over 30 civilians safe on the way out, Private?
Momoy stepped forward.
Sir.
Don't sir me, specialist. We are moving out.
Mullen said, and barged through the room, kicking buckets and other objects in his way across the ground. When he reached the door, he turned, seeing that none of the other members of Section 222, as well as their guest, had moved.
Is this the fabled heroism of humans?
Adina asked, stepping forward and gesturing around with her stolen sword.
Leaving women and children behind?
They are not our problem.
Mullen said darkly, pulling out a short-barreled pistol-grip shotgun from his day pack.
We have to link up with the rest of the section.
Helena set her jaw, then her feet.
No.
Mullen paused, placing the short-barreled Mossberg against one of the hinges.
We are moving on, Private. That is an order. If we take them with us, they will die.
You would not leave the women and children behind, Sergeant Major.
Momoy said, stepping forward to stand beside Helena, who was beginning to vibrate out of nerves. Mullen set his jaw, watching Helena and Momoy, then down at the faces of the children and women watching him. He turned his head back towards the door, then deafened everyone in the room as he quickly blew away the 2 door hinges he could see, the door groaning and leaning outwards into the hallway.
Their deaths are on you.
Mullen said darkly, then tucked his pistol-grip shotgun back into his day pack.
If they want to leave, ask them. Then get them on their feet.
Wolf ducked and ran as tracers flew over his head. He turned and saw everyone else doing the same as they made a break through the back gardens, Yule being supported by both Alavara and Captain Fadithas as they ran. The heads of flowers, petals, and shrubbery bursted apart and rained down around them as they sprinted for the walls, hoping to run along them and reach the gate.
Anyone seen a green flare?
Wolf barked out, aiming up with his rifle and firing blindly at the flashes currently sparkling from multiple windows.
No flares.
Limmick shouted, doing his best to rub mud from his face. During the first part of the sprint, he had tripped over a water can and landed face first into a small herb garden, a strand of which still dangled from his horns.
Vitka, go see about the gate. Look for Regina.
Wolf called out, and the harpy took off with a beat of wings, racing ahead of them towards the gatehouse. Wolf, Yule muttered, his feet struggling to keep pace with those who were carrying him. He could hear something like an engine off to their left, then the sounds of what could have been crates being driven over. He coughed haggardly before trying again. Wolf! Wolf turned his head, stopping near a water fountain and firing at a few of the occupied windows.
What?
Truck, Yule said, coughing again and stumbling down onto his knees, dragging Alavara and Captain Fadithas down with him with a gasp.
Truck?
Wolf called back, his eyes wide under his cattleman's hat. Yule felt Cringer reach down within him and give him a second wind, just enough to get him back onto his feet and soothe his sore throat. Truck! Across the gardens, the carriage house was merrily burning due to the wreckage of the stricken striker, and it found no rest as a larger APC rammed itself through its back wall. Rubble and the remnants of the carriage it plowed through tumbling onto the street and a portion of the gardens.
How the fuck did a Caine get here?
Wolf shouted, leaning out to spray wildly on full auto at a collection of windows that held shooters, attempting to pin them down. Eldehinda, Erinda, Caine, and Makarat ran to join him near the fountain, taking cover where they could and firing at any flash of light they could see. Limmick looked around, spotting the large tan-colored vehicle thundering its way towards them.
That's just an armored personnel carrier, right? No hidden guns or turrets that are going to pop out?
No, Yule said hoarsely, grimacing as Alavara helped him up to his feet. Captain Fadithas dropped to a knee, unslinging her rifle and taking aim at a group of chosen children who were attempting to approach their position. A head popped out of the driver's side window of the charging vehicle, which obliterated a carefully constructed flower bush shaped like some kind of bird. Moon Lily! Captain Fadithus' head snapped towards the Caine as it came on, and her eyes opened wide.
Duh?
Moon Lily, Yule said, confused and looking around for this new person. Another head popped out the other window on the passenger side, and Dakath waved cheerily.
Yule, I brought my father's battle wagon.
Yule smiled in a fuzzy-minded way. Oh, it's Dakath. Alivara, he's the one who healed my baby maker back into place.
Your what?
Alivara shouted as a rifle round snapped by her shoulder, and she tugged Yule down, who had begun to wave in attempting to greet Dakath.
Get down, you idiot!
The Caine's engine roared as Lutai brought it around at an angle, allowing access to the back door as well as shielding them from incoming fire. The rear door opened and Dakath's brother Talon jumped down, still dressed in his royal armor. "Hand me Yule, quickly!" he shouted, and Alivara helped Yule over, allowing the fresher Alberdan Valley elf to haul Yule into the passenger area of the APC.
Everyone in!
Wolf shouted, and they all began to fall back with suppressive fire, hopping up into the Caine one by one until everyone was inside.
Father, how on?
Captain Fadithus began, but Lutai just pointed to Dakath as he put the Caine back in the drive and sped away out of the gardens. Bushes and hedges be damned. "You made a friend," he said, then cranked the wheel, putting them onto the main street towards the gatehouse.
No Caesars?
Vitka asked, leaning over to look at the bundle of explosives currently resting on the raised portcullis. Unlike most keeps, the gatehouse fully protected the portcullis when it was raised up and inside, ensuring it never got damaged, was out of the weather, and was able to be under guard. Not that the guard could have been helped once Vitka arrived. Regina and Gilly had been patiently waiting for the moment to sneak in, which was blundered by Vitka whistling in through an open archway and neatly cleaving the living guards to death with her wing claws and talons. Their plan was to place explosives along the exposed part of the portcullis within the gatehouse, rending the metal and causing it to jam if it was released. There was, however, an issue in that none of them had wire cutters, and needed to attach the detonation wire that ran from the blasting cap to the clapper, which was currently just a large spool in the hands of Gilly.
Bite?
Gilly said, showing his fangs and making mock chewing motions. Vitka rumbled in her throat, cooling blood trickling down her wing claws and talons, and leaned in to grab the wire.
Here, Vitka bite.
Vitka, no!
Regina cried out, reaching over and grabbing the Himalaya's wing claws with her own.
You could get blood on the cut ends. Here, Gilly hold the spool.
Gilly held the spool as commanded and looked around, making sure no one else was coming. Regina held up the wire and looked up to Vitka.
Come down here, Himalaya. I'll hold the wire so you can bite it. Why can't little raven harpy come to Vitka? Vitka find you box to stand on.
Vitka said with an indignant tone, but Regina just sighed patiently.
Vitka, come here. Ah.
Vitka growled, but squatted down to Regina, opening her mouth to expose her sharp fangs.
Always so prideful.
Regina tutted, then slipped the wire into Vitka's jaws.
Get them up into the wagon and make sure they lay down,
Momoy said as he handed the first child up to Helena. The little girl tottered fawn-footed on the wagon's boards before Helena reached over and guided her to where she should lay down. On the other side of the storage barn, Mullen was pushing a UTV into place with the help of Erinda, the small little two-seat utility vehicle barely fitting between the two shafts on either side.
You think this is going to work?
Erinda said, pulling out a few straps and beginning to tie the shafts to the little UTV.
Of course I don't.
Mullen spat out, deftly wrapping the leather bands meant for the horse harness around the bars of the UTV's supports.
We need to go as fast as possible, as more than likely Yule has already left with Wolf's team.
A large explosion thudded out into the night, and Mullen opened the door to the storage barn a crack, peeking out. The gatehouse that was supposed to be the rendezvous location was covered in smoke, and signal flares were being lit all over the walls.
We have to get going now.
Mullen said aloud, running over and quickly tying the rest of the leads, reins, and anything else that could be tied to the UVT.
Are the civilians ready?
Almost.
Helena said, tucking another child into place with the others as Momoy began hefting up the adults. There were, in fact, 32 depth laborers that were led down to the storage barn, and thanks to their knowledge of the keep, they met no resistance the entire way. When asked whether or not they wanted to leave, nearly all of them volunteered, stating they would rather take the chance running the gatehouse than suffering a life like this. As the adults began to find their places, Mullen was climbing inside of the UTV.
Lazy bastards.
Mullen muttered, seeing that the key was still in the receiver, and he twisted it, letting the glow plugs warm. The engine churned a few times when he turned the key further, then rumbled and rattled to life.
We ready?
Momoy hefted himself up into the back of the wagon, reaching down and pulling the small gate up into position before locking it in place with one of the bolts.
Ready.
Stay on the side catching less bullets.
Mullen called out to Erinda, then pushed the gear selector into drive. Helen and Momoy barely had time to brace as the wagon lurched forward swiftly, battering past the doors and grumbling out onto the street. The leather running lines and other tie-ins strained against the metal cage bars of the UTV, and Mullen was causing the wooden wheels of the wagon to rattle violently as it turned a corner, never having been built for speed, let alone G-forces. Helena stumbled and rolled across the boards of the wagon's cargo decking, managing to stop herself a few inches short of smushing a teenage valley up against the side of the wagon's wallboards. Helena looked into her eyes and tried to cram a confident smile on her lips.
Everything is okay. No worries.
She panted out, sitting back up onto her knees and leveraging her Daewoo K2 up onto the wallboard. Erinda looked over, realized she was looking down the barrel of Helena's rifle, and skittered in her step to get it away from her nose.
Watch where you're pointing that wand!
Contact.
Momoy barked, pulling up his pistol in one hand and his grudge breaker in the other.
If only you had a rifle.
Helena called back to him, and she knew he had a scowl on his face without even looking at him. Ahead of them, a green flare was floating down from the sky, having been shot some minutes before, and Mullen was putting on as much speed as he could. Gunfire sparked to life from one of the towers, and Helena swiveled, putting her back against the wall boards and firing back at the staccato flashes in the distance. The firing lanes were obstructed as roofs whooshed by, the machine gunner from the tower simply holding down the hammer and tracing them despite the danger of hitting occupants inside the homes. Roof tiles and splinters of wood kicked up and away far above her, then the round snuck through the gaps and raked the wagon.
Stay down!
Helena cried out, reaching over and shoving anyone poking up above the wall boards back down flat to the decking.
Stay down or you'll get hit!
They have height on us!
Erinda called out, running in between the front and back wheels so she was fully covered, and ducked every now and then when a round zinged too close for comfort. Down the road, the side gate they had come through loomed, smoke billowing out of the archways while licks of flame teased up from the dark void within. Helena saw that something had bashed through the wooden gate, and it sat lopsided in pieces where it used to hang. When they exited out into the T-way for the road that ran along the walls, they no longer had roof cover, and the machine gunner from the tower laid upon their heads a wall of lead. Helena cried out and ducked down low as rounds coursed and sang through the wagon, riddling both body and transport with holes. Momoy grunted as a round split through his hip and buzzed off in a ricochet from the wagon, falling back onto the boards. Helena opened her eyes and sat up once they entered the gatehouse archway and realized she was covered in sprayed blood.
Momoy! Momoy, are you okay?
Helena cried out, checking herself for the wound that should have been there, but found none. No holes in her body one side or the other.
I'm hit. I'll be fine.
Momoy called back, groaning and leaning back up to take his spot on the boards.
Erinda?
I'm still here. I think something cut me on the cheek.
Erinda called out, jumping and skipping over debris that littered their path towards the broken gate. Helena patted herself down one more time, then looked around her.
Who else is...
She began, but the words died like a fall wind in her throat as she realized whose blood she was covered in. Of the 32 civilians they had come away with, only 26 were left still breathing as they hit the gatehouse. A bundle of teenagers had been raked by machine gun fire and lay dead along the wall boards near Momoy, while more women lay dead cradling other children, having blocked the incoming rounds with their bodies. Helena whispered, but was caught off by the UTV battering its way through the wreckage of the gate door, shunting and shuddering the wagon violently. The rear gate rattled open as the wagon hit a piece of gate rubble, slapping down against the rear of the wagon's assembly. The unattended bodies of the dead toppled out, littering along the roadway like discarded dolls as Mullen sped them faster and away from the gatehouse.
Hold on!
Helena screamed, scrambling over to catch two terrified children who were tumbling backwards with the rocking and shaking of the wagon.
Hold on to me.
I'm trying!
A little satyr boy cried out with bright, panicked green eyes, his hands gripping hold on Helena's. The little Alberdan Valley Elf girl on her other hand just cried, holding on to Helena's hand with all the strength she could muster. The wagon bounced fiercely once again, but Helena managed to keep hold of the two children, and with the help of a Valley Elf woman nearby, pulled them back inside the safety of the wagon. The reprieve only lasted for a short breath of time, as a loud clatter answered the question of just how much can these wooden wheels take. A shattering of formed wood and a screech of metal bands heralded the death song of the front right wheel, and the wagon sagged low enough that the exposed end of the front shaft dug into the ground, jolting the wagon powerfully and throwing multiple passengers from the safety within.
Mullen!
Helena screeched as she saw civilians hitting the ground, and she scrambled to the front of the wagon to get his attention.
Mullen, stop!
Mullen had turned in his seat when he felt the UTV shudder from the wheel shattering, and was already spooling down the engine to a halt. They had barely made it 200 yards away from the gate and were well within firing range.
We have to keep moving.
Mullen bellowed as he heaved his way out of the UTV, running after Helena as she bounded after the fallen civilians.
Helena, we have to... Oh, fuck it. Fuck it! Momoy, get in that driver's seat. Adina, try and hold up the back end with your shoulder or something and run along it.
Run along it! I'm a palfrey, not a draft!
Adina called back out, her hair a frayed mess as she quickly snatched a coat from the back of the UTV and began rolling it for shoulder padding. Mullen paid her no mind as he ran after Helena, pumping his legs as fast as he could while gunfire began to crackle from the walls of the city, dirt kicking up around them in plumes. Helena pulled the teenage Valley Elf boy to his feet, then ducked under a satyr woman's shoulders to help her up. Mullen snatched up two other women, pushing them towards the wagon while bundling two children under his arms.
Helena, we have to move. Go!
Mullen roared, running low as a machine gun opened up from the tower again, its red tracers humming and impacting the dirt around them. Helena hefted the satyr and began to run as fast as she could, the woman panting and whimpering as she fought to keep moving despite her wounds. They managed to make it to the wagon just as Momoy figured out how to drive the UTV, and Adina was hefting up the broken side of the wagon, keeping it balanced as the UTV took most of the weight.
Noni!
Adina yelled, and Momoy began to accelerate. The tree line wasn't too far away, and they would soon be in cover. Helena boosted the satyr woman up into the wagon with a yell, then jumped in herself, reaching down to haul in the teenage boy from before. Mullen wasn't too far behind, and gestured up with a childbearing arm.
Take her, damn it!
All right.
Helena cried as random rounds impacted along the wagon, causing her to jerk and shudder as she pulled one of the children up and away from Mullen. Helena looked up, reaching for the next child, but flinched backwards as a rifle round fired from the wall slammed through Mullen's left rib cage, slipping by his rear trauma plate and punching through his lung. Mullen grunted and stumbled, but now used both arms to lift the child, blood already beginning to froth at his nostrils as he kept pace with the wagon.
Take her quickly.
Sergeant Major, you're hit.
Helena yelled, pulling the child up hurriedly as Momoy began to accelerate faster and faster. She held out her hands to Mullen.
Quickly.
I got you.
Mullen barked, reaching out to grab both of Helena's hands as 3 more rounds thudded into his body. One round blew a hole straight through his sternum, the deformed slug bouncing off the wagon's backboard, while 2 more ripped through his stomach. Mullen gave a gurgle as his feet faltered, his eyes wide with outrage.
Help me.
Helena cried out as she turned around, looking past her slung bow to the living occupants, and 2 crawled over, helping Helena haul Mullen into the wagon. Mullen heaved out a breath as blood poured from his wounds, blood foaming at his nostrils, and he slumped against the nearest wallboard, his chest fighting against his failing lungs. Helena knelt in front of him, looking down and around at his wounds as Mullen reached up and clutched at something on his chest, his eyes boring into her like hot coals. Helena reached out and lightly touched at his wounds, blood pouring from them freely and eagerly.
Sergeant Major, we don't have any.
Stupid.
Mullen managed to strangle out of his throat, swallowing hard as his heart struggled to keep pace. Blood was already spilling out the back of the wagon in a river from Mullen, and he blinked, his eyes still endlessly enraged.
Stupid elf.
Helena froze in front of Mullen as he gave a handful of shuddered breaths, then moved no more, his hands still clutched at his collarbones, and his eyes still staring into hers. Helena couldn't even hear the gunfire from the walls. She didn't even notice the bullets singing past them as they entered the woods, the wagon only being able to limp out of range thanks to Erinda. She didn't even realize the wagon had stopped until Momoy shook her shoulder, breaking her from her mind's void.
Helena.
Helena jerked, giving her head a half shake as she looked over to Momoy, who was clutching a ragged piece of bloody cloth to his own gunshot wound.
Momoy?
Momoy looked over to Sergeant Major Mullen, his eyes dull, head limp, and chest no longer moving.
We need to move and meet up with Yule. They're parked just ahead, waiting for us. I think I saw some of them running over.
Helena swallowed, looking around at the remaining civilians, Erinda, then down to Mullen. Helena wasn't sure how long it would take, but she was sure it would be a very long time before she would forget the look of anger Mullen saved for her in his final moments, and those two final words he managed to form before he could no longer hold air. Stupid elf. And that's the end of Chapter 4. Chapter 5 will be happening the second week of April, because the first week of April I'm going to be doing art. So drawing characters, commissions, hopefully some short comics about the series. That'd be fun. I would like to do a week of art, week of writing, week of art, week of writing. That way I have a break and I can actually do art stuff I need to do. What I want to do is I want to draw short comics of the series or whatever and have the VAs narrate them for you guys to enjoy, and we'll see how that goes. The channel is still not monetized, so if you like these stories and others like them, be sure to like, subscribe, and donate via the Ko-fi link to the channel of Garbeardia. If anything, just so I can pay the VAs. I don't care about me right now. I just want to get the VAs their money they deserve, because they put a lot of good work into this. So at the current time, any money I get from donations for the channel is going to the VAs, more or less. Besides that, not much news. Just going to try and change the schedule a bit to try and get more content out that's more visual, because people like their stories, sure, but I think folks want to see art. And what I want to do is I want to do a second edition of the books where there's art stuff in it, so you can like have like a chapter, an art page, a chapter, an art page. It'd be kind of fun, I would think. Chapter 5 is written, but I want to try and do more chapters ahead of time, try and write ahead. That way I have plenty of things that the VAs can voice. And like I said, I'm trying to do things different. But anyway, thank you for listening. If you donate, thank you. If you like, thank you. If you subscribe, thank you. Please comment down below. Let us know how we're doing. We do love comments. Comments is great feedback. There'll be a link for the Discord down below. And until we see you next time here on Garbro's Field Desk, that was Vin, that was Aristic Rider, that was Fire, that was Dusty Parch, our senior female VA, that was Eliza, that was Icicle, that was our guest VA, Rye, and this is Garbeardia / Garbro's Field Desk. See you guys later.
You son of a bitch, now I'm actually coughing.
A shattering of formed wood and a screech of metal bands heralded the death song of the front right wheel. Front right wheel. Front right wheel. Front right wheel. Front right. Fuck. Front right. Ugh.
Hi, Asha. Hi, baby. I'm okay. Just acting. Go lay down. Shh. You're okay. Shh. Lay down, please.
He shrunk inward as a round pierced a thin part of the table. He shrunk inward. Fuck. Limmick looked around the corner of the table quickly and ducked back around, sweat pouring down his... Maybe I should put my phone on silent. That may be a good idea. Ugh.
Let's get Yule to his feet and keep moving. We have to make our way out I was doing so well.
And while the hallway seemed to go on corner after corner, they finally caught sight of a more narrow side staircase. Who wrote this shit? Oh, yeah.
Fucking Fae, Volume 9. You won't believe what these Fae girls get up to.
Leaving women and children behind? Children? What is this Russian accent coming out? What the hell is that? Duh? I can't stop myself from it sounding dumb! No, Roni! I just... Nope, not saying it like that again.
Mullen, stop! Asha, leave it. What are you doing? Oh.
But we're on the Hello. Apparently there's more eye-trilling in a Scottish accent than I initially thought.
Success!